Think you know who you're messing with? Watch what happens when a cocky cop tries to flex on Chuck Norris. The tables turn fast, and the lesson he learns is one he'll never forget. On a perfect spring afternoon in Griffith Park, Los Angeles, everything seemed peaceful and serene. Families were enjoying picnics, children chased butterflies, and the park was filled with the soothing sounds of birds chirping. Amidst the beauty of nature, a man sat quietly on a weathered wooden bench beneath the largest oak tree in the park. This man was none other than Chuck Norris, the legendary martial artist and actor, dressed in his signature denim shirt and cowboy hat. He was calmly feeding pigeons from a small paper bag, an image of simplicity and tranquility, which stood in stark contrast to the bustling world around him. His presence alone commanded respect without the need for attention or grand gestures. Chuck had earned that quiet respect through decades of discipline, skill, and humility. As he sat there enjoying the peaceful moment, little did he know that his calm afternoon was about to be disrupted by an encounter with Officer Brad Thompson, a park cop with a reputation for excessive authority. Thompson was patrolling the park, known by the locals as the Park Tyrant, for his overbearing behavior. He prided himself on his power, often bullying parkgoers with his badge and baton. As he approached Chuck's bench, he didn't recognize the man sitting there, but saw an opportunity to assert his dominance over someone he assumed was beneath him. With his polished boots crushing the gravel beneath him and a smug smirk on his face, Thompson began his walk toward Chuck, unaware that he was about to challenge the last person he should ever pick a fight with. While families, joggers, and other parkgoers looked on, Chuck remained focused on the pigeons, unaware of the storm brewing in his direction. The stage was set for an unforgettable confrontation that would not only alter the course of the day, but change Thompson's life forever. As Officer Brad Thompson, a self-proclaimed park tyrant, approached Chuck Norris in Griffith Park, his confidence was unshakable. Known for his aggressive and domineering behavior, Thompson had no idea who he was about to challenge. When he saw Chuck sitting on the bench, feeding pigeons, he saw a target for his misplaced authority. With a smug smirk, Thompson strode up to Chuck and began his typical power play, informing him that he was violating park rules. He tried to intimidate Chuck, using his badge as a shield, but Chuck, with the calm demeanor of a martial arts master, responded with poise and subtle humor. He didn't engage in the confrontation with anger or defiance, instead calmly explaining he was feeding the birds and that the only disturbance in the park was Thompson's attitude. Chuck's influence was undeniable. He didn't use force to dominate the situation. Instead, he showed Thompson the value of restraint, respect, and grace. As Chuck spoke to the senior officers, he suggested that Thompson could benefit from additional training in martial arts and community service, offering him a second chance rather than resorting to punishment. Chuck's actions and words became a turning point for Thompson, who would later start to rebuild his reputation through humility and discipline. This encounter served as a powerful reminder that true strength isn't defined by power or intimidation, but by the ability to lift others up and make a positive change. In Griffith Park, Chuck Norris found himself in an unexpected standoff with Officer Brad Thompson, a park officer known for abusing his authority. Thompson, eager to assert his dominance, approached Chuck, who was calmly feeding pigeons on a bench. Thompson, puffing up with his badge, tried to intimidate Chuck, claiming he was loitering and demanding he move. Chuck, unbothered, calmly responded, explaining he was actively feeding the birds and causing no disturbance. This only fueled Thompson's anger, as he moved to escalate the situation, drawing his baton. Chuck's composed demeanor only seemed to irritate Thompson further. Despite Chuck's calm responses and gentle deflections, Thompson continued to threaten him. However, Chuck had already sensed the rising tension and was prepared to handle the situation with unmatched skill and wisdom. As Thompson swung his baton toward Chuck, he effortlessly intercepted it, disarming him without even appearing to move. The crowd, now gathered and watching the spectacle unfold, was in awe of Chuck's calm yet powerful response. Even with his baton lost, Thompson refused to back down and drew his taser, aiming it at Chuck. He demanded Chuck stand up, threatening arrest. Chuck, still composed, stood up and challenged Thompson, saying there was no law against feeding birds and no need for the escalation. Thompson, trembling with frustration and rage, then reached for his gun, and in that moment, Chuck's wisdom shone. With one swift move, Chuck disarmed Thompson, leaving the officer in disbelief. In front of an audience of witnesses, Chuck calmly explained that real strength wasn't about the ability to dominate others with force, but knowing when to exercise restraint. Chuck's words struck a chord with the senior officers who arrived on the scene. Chuck, seeing the potential for Thompson to change, suggested that instead of being fired, Thompson undergo additional training in martial arts and community service. This offer of a second chance demonstrated Chuck's belief in redemption and personal growth. By the end of the day, the arrogant officer's life had been transformed, and he began to understand the true meaning of strength and discipline. The scene in Griffith Park unfolded into an unexpected lesson of justice and mercy when Chuck Norris found himself confronted by Officer Brad Thompson, a park officer notorious for his excessive use of power. Thompson, clearly frustrated with his own failed career and bloated sense of authority, walked over to Chuck, sitting quietly on a bench, feeding pigeons. He cast his shadow over the man and demanded that Chuck move, accusing him of loitering. Chuck, without missing a beat, responded calmly, explaining that he was actively feeding the birds and doing no harm, while Thompson's attitude grew more aggressive by the second. As Thompson's authority was challenged, his anger swelled. He attempted to intimidate Chuck further by drawing his baton, but Chuck remained unfazed. Thompson's attempts to assert dominance were swiftly neutralized as Chuck, with remarkable composure and quick reflexes, intercepted the baton mid-swing. The situation, however, escalated when Thompson pulled out his taser and threatened Chuck with arrest. Chuck, standing firm, remained unfazed, asserting that there was no law against feeding the birds and questioning why Thompson felt the need to escalate the situation over such a trivial matter. When Thompson's frustration reached its peak, he drew his service weapon. With the eyes of the crowd upon them, Chuck, in an act of pure control, dismantled Thompson's gun in an instant, disarming him with ease. As Thompson stood there, trembling, Chuck addressed him with calm authority, imparting lessons on the true nature of power and respect. Chuck explained that real strength came from knowing when to use force, not from wielding it recklessly. In a final moment of wisdom, Chuck offered Thompson a chance for redemption, suggesting that he undergo martial arts training and community service rather than face termination. The lesson was clear. True strength lies in self-discipline, respect, and the wisdom to make the right choices, even when confronted with authority. The confrontation in Griffith Park took a transformative turn when Officer Brad Thompson, a park cop with a history of bullying parkgoers, found himself facing Chuck Norris, the legendary martial artist. Thompson, blinded by his own sense of power, approached Chuck, who was peacefully feeding pigeons on a bench, and began harassing him over what he claimed was loitering. Chuck, calm and collected, responded with sharp wit, asserting that he was, in fact, actively feeding the birds, an act of peaceful existence, while Thompson's arrogance seemed to grow with every word. The tension in the air escalated as Thompson, not accustomed to being challenged, reached for his baton, trying to intimidate Chuck into compliance. However, Chuck's response was swift and nonviolent. He intercepted the baton with ease, displaying not only his martial arts skill but his remarkable restraint. Thompson, humiliated by this disarming move, was further provoked and, in a fit of rage, pulled out his taser. But Chuck, unperturbed, told Thompson to take a moment to reflect on his actions. His calm presence was a stark contrast to Thompson's shaking hands, and this was the moment that would change the officer's life forever. Thompson, unable to control his emotions, went one step further and reached for his service weapon. It was here that Chuck, with years of discipline and understanding, revealed the true nature of strength, knowing when not to use power. In a flash, Chuck disarmed Thompson, demonstrating that real power came from control, not from domination. The moment was a wake-up call, not just for Thompson but for everyone around. As the senior officers arrived and assessed the situation, Chuck's intervention shifted the entire dynamic. Instead of firing Thompson, Chuck suggested a path of redemption. martial arts training, community service, and a chance to regain his humanity. Through Chuck's wisdom, Thompson was given the opportunity to rebuild himself, teaching everyone in the park that real strength lies in humility, self-control, and the willingness to learn. In Griffith Park, a tense moment unfolded between Officer Brad Thompson, a power-hungry park cop, and Chuck Norris, a figure whose calm demeanor and unmatched martial arts skills made him a force to be reckoned with. Thompson, known for his bullying behavior, had been harassing park-goers all day. When he spotted Chuck sitting peacefully on a bench, feeding pigeons, he saw an opportunity to assert his dominance. His approach, full of arrogance, soon turned into a confrontation. Thompson tried to bully Chuck into leaving, citing loitering laws, but Chuck, with his signature calm, pointed out the absurdity of the officer's demands. As the tension grew, Thompson threatened Chuck with his baton, and the crowd began to sense something was about to happen. However, Chuck remained unshaken, showing the officer the strength of his character rather than physical power. When Thompson swung his baton toward Chuck, he effortlessly disarmed the officer, proving that true power isn't about violence, but knowing when and how to act. The crowd, witnessing this incredible display of restraint, was in awe. But Thompson wasn't done. Angered and embarrassed, he escalated the situation, pulling out his taser and threatening Chuck again. In a remarkable display of control, Chuck calmly talked Thompson down, urging him to reconsider his actions. Chuck's words were not those of a man trying to prove himself, but of a teacher trying to reach someone lost in their own anger and arrogance. In the heat of the moment, Chuck disarmed Thompson completely, both figuratively and literally. The officer's service weapon was now in pieces on the ground. When senior officers arrived, Chuck suggested that Thompson receive further training in martial arts and counseling. The officer, humiliated but changed, was given a second chance, a rare opportunity for redemption. Through Chuck's wisdom, Thompson learned the importance of humility, justice, and using power wisely. In Griffith Park, an unexpected encounter unfolded between Officer Brad Thompson, a power-hungry cop, and Chuck Norris, a legendary martial artist known for his wisdom and restraint. Thompson, who had a reputation for bullying park-goers, saw Chuck sitting peacefully on a bench, feeding pigeons, and thought it was the perfect opportunity to flex his authority. With arrogance, Thompson confronted Chuck, demanding that he leave the bench for loitering. Chuck, calm and composed, responded with respect, explaining that he was feeding the birds, and they seemed pretty active. This subtle defiance irked Thompson, leading to escalating threats. As Thompson's frustration grew, he reached for his baton, threatening Chuck. In an instant, Chuck disarmed him with ease, showcasing the incredible control and discipline he had developed over his years of martial arts training. Chuck, with quiet authority, reminded Thompson that true power comes not from asserting dominance, but from knowing when not to use force. Thompson, humiliated and angry, attempted to take the situation further by pulling out his taser. However, Chuck, still calm, pointed out the absurdity of the situation. An officer pulling a weapon on a man feeding pigeons. Despite Thompson's aggressive stance, Chuck remained unwavering, advising him to reconsider his actions. At that moment, Thompson's temper led him to draw his service weapon, but Chuck's steady, unflinching gaze made him hesitate. When Thompson threatened him, Chuck, in one swift move, dismantled Thompson's gun, rendering it useless. He explained that real power was about restraint and knowing when not to use violence. As the situation escalated, senior officers arrived, and Chuck suggested Thompson receive further training, including martial arts and counseling, to learn discipline. Rather than firing him, Chuck offered him a chance for redemption. The crowd, who had witnessed the entire event, realized that the true strength Chuck displayed was not in his ability to fight, but in his ability to teach and show mercy. The confrontation between Officer Brad Thompson and Chuck Norris in Griffith Park became a turning point for both men, especially for Thompson, who was a park officer known for his aggressive behavior. That fateful afternoon, Thompson approached Chuck, who was peacefully feeding pigeons, and attempted to assert his authority by accusing Chuck of loitering. With a calm demeanor, Chuck respectfully responded, explaining that he was feeding the birds and that his actions weren't disruptive. Thompson, angered by Chuck's defiance, escalated the situation by grabbing his baton, attempting to intimidate Chuck into compliance. What followed was a masterclass in discipline and restraint. Chuck, with years of martial arts experience, effortlessly disarmed Thompson and reminded him that true power isn't about exerting control over others, but knowing when to avoid using force. Thompson's aggression only intensified, and he threatened to arrest Chuck for assaulting an officer and for feeding pigeons in the park, even though there was no law against it. However, Chuck maintained his composure, calmly explaining the absurdity of the situation. As Thompson pulled his taser out, Chuck, undeterred, stepped closer and made Thompson pause, urging him to reflect on his behavior before drawing a weapon. At this moment, Chuck dismantled Thompson's gun with remarkable speed, showing not only his martial arts expertise, but also the wisdom that came with it. He told Thompson that real strength lies in knowing when not to use violence. Just as the situation reached its peak, senior officers arrived, and Chuck suggested a path of redemption for Thompson. Instead of firing him, Chuck advocated for additional training, counseling, and community service as a way for Thompson to learn discipline and reconnect with the people he was meant to serve. Thompson's path to redemption began with his first steps in martial arts training, marking a humbling transformation from a power-hungry officer to a more mindful, disciplined one. The confrontation between Chuck Norris and Officer Thompson carries profound lessons on patience, humility, and responsibility. One of the key messages is that true strength does not come from power or dominance, but from the ability to restrain and use strength wisely. Life is not always about proving oneself. Rather, it's about respecting others, acknowledging our mistakes, and growing from them. The opportunity Thompson had to correct his path instead of facing punishment shows that change and personal growth are always possible if we remain open-minded. This lesson is particularly important for older adults, as it encourages lifelong learning and the continual improvement of character, regardless of age. Sometimes a kind gesture or a piece of honest advice can be the most powerful way to change our lives and the lives of those around us. For seniors, this message is especially valuable because it reinforces the idea that it's never too late to grow, evolve, and make a positive impact on the world, proving that the journey of self-improvement is a lifelong one. True strength lies in how we use our power and treat others. Respect, humility, and learning from our mistakes are what define real character. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts below, and let's keep the conversation going. Stay strong, stay kind.